want to know, what can I grow now? How do I grow big? Like Grow Big TV. Talking right here.
Welcome to Grow Big TV.
Laughing out loud. But I'm still learning. You're on Grow Big TV. On Grow Big TV.
And here's Joe and Corky.
Hi, everyone. Well, Corky's not here. She had a family emergency. So this morning, Corky called Tammy, say, Tammy, would you come on in? And Tammy was, sure, I'll come on in. I was snoring away when this happened, so it's all good. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm so happy Tammy came through. And because I was thinking when I seen that text right away, my first thing in my mind was, oh, I wonder who I could have in my channel today. And I was thinking, hey, maybe I should give Tammy a call. Then I'm like, great. And I'm like, oh, she already asked Tammy. Perfect. So
She knows I'm up at 5 o'clock. So I've been up for an hour. I've had my coffee. It was easy to say yes.
Well, thank you for coming on today. We have an awesome interview today with Nathan Pumplin, CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to disagree a lot. Maybe we won't. Hopefully, we will all come somewhere in the middle, because that's what it's about today. It's everybody about, you got to learn. Stop. I always say in this channel, I think probably every single live, put stuff in your pocket. Put stuff in your pocket. Because this is Nathan's work. You know, he wants to make people healthier. And that's where everything comes down to when we're talking about genetics and science and all kind of stuff. We can't just sit in our heels and just do everything here alone. We need to learn more. Just like how we talk about the soil and that we're on our last inch of soil, that, hey, we need to learn more because there's such problems with our food supply right now. We have here, you used to be able to eat a piece of fruit and this, your food table, and well, it doesn't, you don't have enough nutrition in your. So we need to improve. We need to get better soils. We need to learn about the genetics and things and make healthier fruits and vegetables. So thank you, everybody, for coming on in today. There's Simply Jan. There's Jane, Built on a Rock Homestead. A lot more people are going to be coming on in. Garden State So-and-so, which is Robin. So let's welcome in Nathan Pumplin, CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Tammy. Thanks for having me.
So have you ever used artificial intelligence on research or anything?
I've played with it a little bit. Usually the way I would use Google to look up different questions.
So this is a good question. Who's in the background? We hear.
Are you hearing my son screaming a little bit?
Which is all good. It's no complaint. It's family. It's what happens.
It's family in real life. Yep.
Real life. And so, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. So I'm not sure. My wife is with them right now. They're gonna go meet up with her mom here. So he's upset about something, and I'm here with you all.
I love that life. My son is 15 now, and we've been through a lot of problems. He had cancer and a lot of things.
Oh my gosh.
And so I miss the kids crying when they're little, and as you get older, you miss it more and more. So hearing that voice in the background, it's like, this is awesome.
I love hearing that. And you mentioned at the intro, sort of putting things in your pocket. And I hear so many folks with older kids say, you got to hold on to these times. You got to enjoy them every day, even when sometimes it's challenging, because you're going to miss them when they get older. And I appreciate all of those inputs now, because it really is beautiful. And family's the best part of my life.
My kids go from 36 to 16. And I have grandkids in the same age bracket as my youngest adopted son. And it goes by, that 36 years went by in a blink of an eye. It really did. You have no idea how fast those sounds are jewels. You
Yeah.
will remember.
I love it. Welcome in LP. Welcome in Shawnee Groves. We got one of the best mods on YouTube in Jane Doe. So welcome in Jane for helping out and doing all the dirty work. Welcome in Troy Sutton. So using AI, this is just a co-pilot. We're going to see what they know about Nathan. So I like doing this. It cracks me up, especially when they have the wrong person. We have a special, these 3 special girls in Michigan, and they're called the Vineyard Chicks. That's who did our intro too. And they're homeschooled, and they do everything at home. They have you'll love them, those girls. Raising kids right, their parents did a great job. Not everything. I just very special to me. Anyway,
As a homeschooler from Michigan, I especially appreciate that.
well, you went to Cornell, so this is being homeschooled to go into Cornell.
That's right.
Shows you it works a little bit. Okay, so let's go. Let's ask a co-pilot a question. Hopefully this works.
Welcome back, Joe. I'm here to help.
Can you tell me more about Nathan Pumplin, the CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce?
Pumplin has a strong background in plant genetics and biotechnology. He's leveraging his experience to drive innovations in the agricultural sector by developing healthier produce options, like the nutrient-enriched purple tomato. He's had roles in both research and the commercial side of biotechnology throughout his career. What sparked your interest in him?
Well, can you tell me a little more about Nathan Pumplin's bio?
Nathan Pumplin earned his PhD in plant genetics and completed postdoctoral studies in plant biochemistry. Before becoming Norfolk Healthy Produce's CEO, he held leadership roles in agricultural biotech companies, focusing on bringing innovative crops to market. His work emphasizes developing produce with enhanced nutritional value and consumer benefits. Anything you want to explore about his work in particular?
Nathan, want to know a little more about you?
Well, she's totally right. It's on the head.
What aspect of Nathan's work or background are you most curious about?
I love it.
That's amazing.
I love it. I love using just Copilot, and it's not even. It's just the beginning of things.
I completely agree. Yeah, and there's so much information out there, and being able to sort through it, and then launch these kind of discussions that we have directly with each other is really beautiful.
So, what was your professional journey before becoming a CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce?
Yeah, so I would say one of the early pieces was working at a restaurant and really falling in love with food, and especially this magical transformation. So let me give you kind of the story that sparked it for me. I was in Michigan, in East Lansing at Michigan State as a student, walking through campus, and a hawk flew right in front of me and landed on a tree, like 10 feet away. And I realized it had a little chipmunk in its talons, and it reached down with its beak and was trying to rip off the head of the chipmunk so it could eat it. And I was like fascinated by this. And another student walked by next to me, and she looked at this and she was like, "Ew, that's so gross." And she kind of ran away, right? And I was transfixed by this. And I kind of reflected on this for a while of, there's this magical transformation that we do when we produce food, whether it's growing vegetables in the garden or butchering an animal. You take something from the natural world, and it's a magical transformation to then turn it into food that nourishes us. It's obviously, it's important for our bodies, for our health and nutrition. It's also so much of our cultural connection with each other, right? Eating a meal together, preparing a meal together. This is sort of a magical piece that connects us as human beings with each other and connects us to the natural world. And so that was kind of the spark for me that said, I want to be involved in feeding people. And I worked for a restaurant for a little while. I said, well, I don't think that's quite it. And then I kind of fell in love with biology. And the thing that gripped me about biology was predator and prey interactions, and how, so a specific thing, there's a type of snake that eats a type of salamander, which is poisonous. So think of like, poison dart frogs. A tiny little bit is enough to kill a person. And yet they've developed this kind of poison. That's just a fascinating idea. And it's because they're eaten by something that's developed a resistance to the poison. And so we can look at evolution back and forth, how this process plays out. And I thought that was really fascinating. And the same thing happens with the plants that we grow in our garden, that we grow in farms. These are attacked all the time by diseases. So I got really interested in that. And that's what I started studying the scientific basis of, the genetics of. This led me to do a PhD, not on diseases, but on the interaction between plants and fungi that live in the soil. And I'm guessing a lot of the people here know about mycorrhiza. These are fungi that live in the soil. They form an association with plant roots, and they help plants take up nutrients. So when we think about regenerative agriculture, a lot of this has to do with the microbes that live in the soil, that store carbon, that cycle nutrients, that help plants take up nutrients really efficiently. And this is obviously sort of stands against fertilizer runoff and a lot of the issues that regenerative ag stands for. So that was a lot of my research basis. I went on to work on projects to say, how can we use our understanding of science to make the way that we produce food more efficient and more environmentally friendly in the long run? And one of the things, so I'm sorry for being so long, but I'll land you right to where I am now. One of the things that I saw for 20 years doing research is there's all of these really smart scientists doing interesting projects. And one of the things, when you study science, it very quickly, you go down these rabbit holes, you get really, really deep. So when you study plant genetics, pretty soon you say, okay, I'm trying to understand this gene. So tomatoes have 35,000 genes, and you might get to the point where you say, okay, I think this one gene or these 10 genes are really important for producing nutrients of a certain kind in plants. So now I want to understand how they work. And one of the tools that we often use is these biotechnology tools, where you say, okay, what if we add in another copy of the gene? What if we change this little detail about it? How does that affect the system? And it's the same way that gardeners say, hey, what if I change the fertilizer? How will this affect? Or what if I put on this microbe inoculant? How will that affect it? And this tool is making transgenic plants quite often. So you're introducing bits of DNA. And for plant scientists, this is a very typical process that we use. This is making GMOs. And so one of the things that I became really fascinated was not just the science, but the larger culture around it. And what is, the average person's perception of GMOs and how it fits into the food supply. And so for a lot of people, GMOs, if they know what it is, they have a negative association with it. And a lot of that is separated from the actual science. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that. And so that led me to what I'm doing with Norfolk Healthy Produce, which is there's a biotechnology tool that makes a purple tomato. There's a lot of benefits of the purple tomato itself. It has the antioxidant nutrients of blueberries. This is something we should all eat a lot more of. And so it's one extra little way that we can eat the rainbow. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to have a conversation about the science that I've worked in a completely new way, where, there's not the baggage of talking about Monsanto and Roundup. I'm going to tee that up because I know it's coming. We have just this completely different conversation, and I get to talk to folks like you. So that's what brought me here. Maybe a few factoids. So I'm a proud father and husband. I live in Davis, California, originally from Michigan. We've been here for 8 years. And one of the things that's been most fascinating, then I'll shut up, is just the response that we've had from the purple tomato. I've been doing this for 3.5 years. When I got started, people thought, you're trying to sell GMO tomatoes? I mean, what a weirdo. Why are you guys doing this? And now we get at the point where when I show people the tomato, they're like, wow, that is so cool. What is that? I want to try that. Is that what you call a GMO? And there's so much curiosity and so much interest. And we run a farmers market booth, for instance, here in Davis, California. And that's one of my favorite ways to talk to people and have this brand new conversation. And it's quite a big tent. So again, thanks for having me here. And I'm excited to discuss a bunch of these topics.
So if you guys have any questions during a live, just make sure they're all in caps. And we're going to try to stay somewhat organized. This is going to be repeating questions and things like that. And Nathan, like I said, this is awesome that you're here, because there is when you say GMOs, people automatically will say, I don't want nothing to do with that. Bam, they don't even listen. Well, that's the reason why I think it's time for we could just put stuff in our pocket and learn a little bit, because I'm telling you right now, the nutrition in vegetables and fruits, or roots and vegetables, it's not the same anymore. It just isn't the same. And we need to get some kind of balance back in life here. So how did your previous role prepare you for your current position?
So in two ways, the science side of what I've done in my career prepared me because I understand the details on a technical side of what we've done. You know, how does the purple tomato work, and what was the technology that enabled it to be made? And I think if I didn't have that understanding, I wouldn't be able to have a confident conversation and really share information. The thing that I was only somewhat prepared on is more of the commercial side of things. How do you actually develop a new variety of tomatoes and get it out onto the market? And that's something that we as a company and me as an individual have been learning step by step, talking to a lot of people who have experience and have been there before. And also, you know, as a startup company doing something that's a little bit outside the norm, we've had to invent some things and improvise a little bit.
So, got a question here. I'm intrigued about the science behind GMO. Please elaborate.
Yeah. So what people call a GMO, it stands for genetically modified organism. And what that typically means is it is a tomato, for instance, that has some DNA that's been added from another species. So our purple tomato, for instance, the DNA was added from snapdragon. Snapdragon is an edible flower. It was one of my favorites as a kid. You know, you can squeeze the side of the flower and it sort of open and closes. The way that scientists did this, it is actually a very natural process. So some people think, oh, GMOs, it's this unnatural thing that scientists created. It's actually something that we learned from nature. So there is a bacteria called Agrobacterium, which the way that it infects plants is adding its DNA to plants. So if you've ever seen a tree with a big gall, like a big thing sticking out of the side, that's an Agrobacterium infection. The way it works naturally is it puts its DNA into the plant and it reprograms the plant to produce its food and also to grow its cells. So it's almost like creating a home for itself in the plant. So scientists were understanding these galls, saying, hey, where does that come about? They learned this process. And then they said, well, what if we were to change the DNA of this bacterium? So instead of it making a tumor, it can put in other types of DNA that we're interested in. So what the bacteria has learned how to do is put DNA into the plant. And then scientists have learned how to change which DNA goes into a plant. And so that's the basis of making GMOs. And now the question is, what is the DNA that you put in? Where does it come from, and how does it affect the plant? And so, you know, a lot of people think GMOs mean pesticides. Sometimes the GMOs that are made they're not really pesticides, but they have properties that make plants resistant to diseases. So a lot of you probably know BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. This is typically used in organic growing. It's a bacteria that you can get. It's completely natural product. You can spray it on your plants and it makes them resistant to insects. One of the tricks that people did with GMOs was take the active ingredient from this organic insect control agent, and splice it into plants. So you don't have to spray the BT anymore. The plants are naturally resistant. In the case of our tomato, there's no pesticides. There's nothing to do with Roundup. It's simply 2 genes from Snapdragon that activate the natural ability of tomatoes to make these purple nutrients.
So I want to show where you could buy the seeds for the purple tomato and a website at Norfolk Healthy Produce. It's right here. So Norfolk Healthy Produce. Now, didn't you guys sell a flower that glows in the dark too?
So that's not our company. That's a completely different company. And we came out about the same time. So the flower is the firefly petunia. And that is also a GMO flower. It glows in the dark, which is really cool. And it's a sign of the times that we're in, where there's now a few plants that are made with biotechnology that are made for people to enjoy, right? They're not made simply to improve the efficiency of farming. They're made directly to benefit people who are enjoying the plants. And so this is kind of a radical thing. This hasn't really existed, with a few exceptions. So golden rice is one example that's an original GMO. We can dive into that if people are interested. This is kind of GMO 3.0 or GMO 2.0. And one of the things that I think is really important is this is not companies pushing products out and treating people like guinea pigs in some experiment. I'm on this show, and I'm out there in the world all the time, having a conversation with people and trying to listen and learn and find out who wants this. And one of the surprises again over the last 2 years has been just how many people really want a purple tomato and really want a glow in the dark petunia. And it's much, much more than any of us expected, as long as we have this dialogue and we're all listening to each other.
Now, on your site, it says, call on all market growers. NHP wants to grow with you. Click here for details. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would like as many people who are interested to eat purple tomatoes to do this. So some people buy seeds from our website, grow them in their garden, and they can feed their families, their communities that way. A lot of people buy their fruit at grocery stores or farmers markets. And so one of the early things we did was started getting seed to people who sell fruit at farmers markets. And we have a proprietary variety. So the purple tomato that we developed, it took a lot of years. It's a very special product, and we want to make sure that it's getting out to people high quality appropriately. So we've worked with a select set of growers that go to farmers markets. We have about a dozen or so growing right now through the US, actually a little higher than that now. And so if any of your listeners are interested, please reach out to us.
I like how you have in the news with Norfolk Healthy Produce. Let me see. NPR. Gardeners can grow a genetically modified purple tomato made with Snapdragon DNA. And so when you're growing this tomato, guys, it looks like more of a brown outside, but once you cut into it, it's totally purple, as we shown up in the beginning of the film. Is that correct, or is it supposed to be more of a purple on the outside?
So the outside, for me, it looks like an eggplant. So it's almost black. It's so dark.
Black, okay.
And you know, the thing that makes our tomatoes purple, it's called anthocyanins. And every time I say that on an interview, my wife says, "You got to stop saying anthocyanins. You really sound like a nerd." But that is the nutrient that's there. It's a type of antioxidant. It is exactly the same thing that makes eggplant skins black or purple. It's also the same thing that makes purple potatoes, you know, these Peruvian purple potatoes. It's the same thing that colors them. And so there are other tomatoes that have a little bit of purple on the skin. So some people here may know Cherokee purple that has a little bit on the shoulders, indigo rose, midnight Roma, black beauty. There's a few of these that have a little bit. It's the same nutrient that's in our tomatoes. What's special about ours, and you can only get this through bioengineering, is that it has the purple all the way throughout the fruit. So when you cut it in half, instead of being red on the inside, it's completely purple.
So Eating Well magazine, what are purple tomatoes and are they healthy? So you talk about the anthocyanins. Say, I can't even say it. I'm not the nerd.
Good for you.
What other health benefits are with the purple tomato over a regular tomato?
Yeah, so the main thing is these anthocyanins, and this is a class of antioxidants which have unique properties. They're in blueberries, they're in blackberries, there's some in red cabbage, there's some in red grapes, and they have anti-cancer properties. They're good for heart health, they're good for lung health. There's emerging science now showing that for mental health, they can be very beneficial. And, you know, I want to be really clear that this is not a silver bullet, right? It's not like this is some magic cure that's going to cure everything. What is really, really important for our own health and well-being is eating a balanced diet of fresh fruits and vegetables and eating the rainbow, right? So it's important to eat lycopene and anthocyanin and chlorophyll and beta carotene. The best way to get a really healthy diet is to eat all different types of fruits and vegetables, as seasonally as you can, as locally as you can, and really get that balance. So what we know is that the purple is often harder to find, right? There's lots of green things to eat, lots of red things to eat, not as much purple. And people in the US, for instance, eat about 20 times more tomatoes than they do blueberries. And so that's the main health benefit that comes with the purple tomatoes is another source, a different source of the purple nutrients. I want to throw in too, one of the things that's really cool about the purple tomato, it has longer shelf life. So it turns out the antioxidants, they're not just good for us, they're also good for the tomatoes. And when you think about food waste and the efficiency of how we make food, longer shelf life can be really helpful in reducing waste.
Love this talk. I really, I should have this for 3 hours. You can imagine the kids.
Yeah.
So,
I could do it all day long. You can see that.
so we have another question. In regards to GMO, does the DNA change affect human life, causing diseases?
Yeah. So the change is it reduces the chance of disease. And this is a misconception about GMOs that somehow they may change human DNA or having changed the plant DNA may have some impact on people. And there's no evidence whatsoever that suggests this. So GMOs are really just like anything else. One of the important things to know, so tomatoes have about 35,000 genes, and we've added in 2 from Snapdragon. So this is a tiny drop in the bucket. And we've now been eating for decades GMOs. And most people probably know most of the processed food that we eat has bioengineered ingredients. And there's also a number of whole foods now available on the market that have been produced partly with biotechnology, with GMOs. There's no evidence whatsoever that says that these are any different. And so it's not going to change your DNA. It's not going to affect people eating GMOs versus eating anything else. And one of the things that most people don't know, and I always try to emphasize, is even though we've used biotechnology to make a purple tomato, we have done much, much more plant breeding. So, biotechnology is like a cherry on top. It doesn't make a great tomato. What makes a great tomato is good breeding and good farming. And just because you have biotechnology, that's a little switch. But we've had to do a heck of a lot of the things that people have done for thousands and thousands of years, which is, do the breeding, work with really good farmers. And not all of our purple tomatoes have been great. We've had a lot of them that don't taste good, that don't grow well. Just that's the nature of plant breeding. So those of you who have played with diversity in breeding or growing different varieties, they're not all great, and it takes a lot of experimentation to find what works in your garden. And we've been doing the same thing.
So we got one more. We got LPS a question. How extensively have the effects of eating GMO crops been studied?
Yeah, so quite extensively. And One of the ways that this has been done is looking at countries that have GMOs in the food supply versus countries that don't have them in the food supply, and doing these large cross comparison studies that see there's no impact that can be tied to GMOs. Um, there's overwhelming support from scientists who have done this work that says there's not really a big difference. There's no difference between GMO and non-GMO, and there's no mechanism that suggests there would be, and there's no difference when you look at the data on health outcomes. What is very, very important is what is our diet and what does it consist of? How many calories do we eat? What are the sources of those calories? And I think oftentimes when people think GMOs, it is also associated with eating a lot of processed foods, of sort of, cheap ingredients. And those are really separated from GMOs. That's a very important topic.
You
So-
mentioned golden rice really briefly, and golden rice was a huge game changer for third world countries that were deficient in vitamin A. So people have been eating GMO modified golden rice since I believe 2007-ish, somewhere in there. And I remember when it first came out, I was really excited about it because being in the healthcare field, I was aware of the problems with blindness in third world countries. It was huge, absolutely huge. And we barely hear about it anymore because of golden rice. How did you choose what you wanted to work on with the tomato, with that history?
So, Tammy, I'm glad you bring up golden rice. There's actually a personal connection. So after I finished my PhD at Cornell, I went to Switzerland to do research at a university. And I was working in a lab next door to the lab that developed golden rice.
Oh, wow.
And there were still some of the original developers there. And I used to teach a class to undergraduate students. And one of the papers we talked about was golden rice. And we also talked about the scientific paper of the purple tomato. So that's how I first found out about the purple tomato, was teaching students about it. And I had I wasn't pro, I wasn't against, I was interested in it. And it's a 2008 publication. It's really a fascinating piece of plant science because they show how they made the purple tomato, and then they go all the way to feeding it to cancer-prone mice and showing that mice that eat purple tomatoes have 25 to 30% less incident, or they live 25 to 30% longer than mice that were fed red tomatoes or no tomatoes. So golden rice sort of got me aware of the purple tomato, and that's what led the founders to bring me on to help commercialize it. One of the things that's actually really sad about golden rice is not that many people are able to eat it. And a lot of that has to do with the controversy around GMOs and people saying, oh, we don't want golden rice planted, and we're not so sure that it's safe to eat because it's a GMO. And again, the scientific evidence says there's no concerns about the safety of GMOs, and eating golden rice can have a huge impact on childhood blindness. And yet there's still this perception that, oh, we're not so sure it's safe, and so it's actually been held back from a lot of markets. Golden rice is also, when the first ones came out, it didn't have very high levels of the provitamin A. And so that was something that was kind of limited. And also, I believe some of the flavor and the way that it cooked were not as good as other kinds of rice. And so some of the people rejected it because they said it's not good enough. That's not because it's a GMO. It's simply, it takes a lot of years of plant breeding to get a GMO that's as good as other things. And people often forget that because they think, oh, scientists wave a magic wand and all of a sudden you have this thing. But actually, like, it's a heck of a lot of work and it takes a heck of a lot of time to get there. So the other thing with golden rice is there was this patent landscape. And so a lot of people, when they think about GMOs, they say, hey, I believe that for health, it's really good, but there's all this intellectual property and patents and companies owning things. And it doesn't seem right that people should own life. And so that's also something that held back golden rice. And I think it's lumped together when a lot of people think about GMOs and this technology.
It's a balance that's hard to navigate because, I mean, on one hand, this is a hugely beneficial could be food staple for a lot of people, but then who owns it and what are they going to do with those ownership rights? So it is a conflict.
Absolutely. And right now, my understanding is Golden Rice is mostly owned or entirely by NGOs. And they're working to get this out to farmers and out to people who can benefit, not with a profit model. They're not trying to make a bunch of money, they're trying to get it out. And one of the things, places where vitamin A deficiency is a big problem, people have seeds that they save that they replant every year. And it's not possible to distribute lots of fruits and vegetables, even fertilizers. And so distributing seeds is actually a very efficient way to get nutrients out to people, because as most of seeds you can amplify yourself. You grow one season, you save them, you can grow more the next year. And so that's where golden rice is such a win. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to grow more and more, and there'll be more products like this that can really get nutrition into the hands of farmers and people who need it.
Yeah.
So I want to show everybody where you can buy the seeds at. Same site I just showed you before. But if you go up here to products, click on that. Got some hats right over here. Just click on a purple tomato seed packet. And you can buy your seeds right there. I will be buying some later.
Thank you, Joe.
So I think that's pretty cool. I still love the picture of the purple. Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, it is the most beautiful tomato I've ever seen. I have to say that. I'm not a big tomato eater. I like my tomato cooked in things.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct? Is it a cherry tomato?
It's a cherry tomato. Yep. Yeah. And there's a few reasons why we started with the cherry tomato. And what we're doing now here in Davis is breeding new varieties of purple tomatoes. So we'd like to have large tomatoes that you can slice and put on a sandwich. We'd like to have purple tomatoes that are more, better for canning, better for making sauces. And we can make all sorts of different types of purple tomatoes, because again, it's all about what's the background genetics, right? So as everyone here knows, there's all sorts of different varieties of tomatoes that grow differently, that have different types of fruits. And so we're making a few different types of purple tomatoes.
Sign me up for the purple paste tomato study.
Excellent. Tammy got you down for that.
Okay.
So what I noticed on the packet, though, you fertilize your favorite tomato fertilizer like 18-18-21. Is that a little high, or is that because it's GMO?
So this doesn't grow any differently because it's a GMO. 18-18-21 is the recommendation that came from our grower, and it's easily available. Obviously, it depends how much you put in your soil, right? So that's not the final concentration. That's something that you would mix in your soil. For those who say, they do everything with compost, that's also an excellent way to do it. So the recommendation I usually give is however you usually grow your tomatoes, that's the best way to grow the purple tomato. And everyone knows their own garden beds, their own backyard better than anyone else. And growing conditions are so much different in different regions. And so I'm always blown away by gardeners with green thumbs, what they're able to do. I'm like a fair to middling gardener at best, I think.
So a big supporter of mine from the very beginning is Grown with Hudson. She goes, so Dr. Pumplin, do you have a discount code? Because it's kind of pricey. Ask him for a friend.
I love it, Hudson. We don't have a discount code right now. And what I highly recommend is that you go in together with a few friends, with a few neighbors, and split a packet of seeds. You get at least 10 seeds in the packet. And this is enough plants then to share with your community. This is what we believe. One of the things I want to say about the GMO, and I'll explain the price. One is it's a brand new variety on the market. We have very limited supplies of it. This is why the price is that high. it is a premium tomato, right? So there's lots of fantastic heirloom tomatoes out there. I always recommend that people grow a diversity of different tomatoes, and if you're keen and you're able, add the purple tomato on top. This kind of also goes to the safety questions around GMO. We had to do a lot of regulatory work in order to be able to sell the tomato and even make it available in the US. So the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, they all regulate crops that are made with biotechnology. So we spent about 5 years or so collecting data on the tomato so we could get through this regulatory process and demonstrate, look, there's no safety concerns, there's no health concerns of this tomato that are any different from any other kind of a tomato. So, you can get E. coli poisoning or salmonella poisoning from anything. Our tomato is no different. We basically had to show that there's no health concerns, no allergenicity, all of these things. So GMO products are heavily reviewed. If you develop a new variety by traditional breeding, these are not reviewed, right? So you could cross all sorts of things. You can grow natural plants. These can go out. And of course, we know, there's a lot of plants out there that are poisonous. These are not reviewed. And yet, because the biotechnology has this kind of stigma, and can be a powerful technology to change how plants function, there's this heavy review process. And so I hope that gives some comfort to people on the safety side, added comfort. And then it also is, we're trying to just pay back the costs that we've spent and hopefully get to the point that we can get a lot of other tomatoes out there.
Now, you can't save these seeds, correct? Because it's GMO.
You can save these seeds. Yep. And that's another common misconception. Some people say, oh, GMOs, they have these terminator genes and, companies have made them so they like self-destruct. And that's not the case. These seeds that we're sending, they're open pollinated. People do save seeds. And, for those of you who save seeds in your garden, you can save these as you would other heirlooms and you can plant them again next year.
That's a pretty awesome answer, because I heard, hey, I buy 10 seeds. I'm growing 300 tomato plants. Yeah. Imagine having a whole purple garden.
I can imagine that. I do. Still good to have a mix.
Send pictures.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I wanted to take the opportunity to make a quick note about hybrids and inbreds and OPs. I don't want to hijack if you guys have other questions. So a lot of gardeners know about getting hybrid seeds or F1s, and these are different from heirlooms, right? So if you have heirlooms or open pollinated, you can grow them, you can save the seed. The next season, you can grow that seed and it will look the same as its parent, right? So that's an heirloom or an OP. Hybrids, on the other hand, are made when you cross two heirlooms together. So they're called an F1 because they're the first cross between, say a Cherokee purple and a Brandywine, right? You cross those together, that would give you an F1 hybrid. That would give you a uniform seed that you can grow. And the reason that people grow hybrids when they do is you get the best of both parents. So maybe one parent is resistant to Phytophthora, omycete disease, another parent is resistant to another disease. One parent has really great flavor, one parent has a really beautiful fruit. You cross them together and the hybrid has the best of those worlds. If you save that seed, the next generation is no longer a hybrid. Then you've shuffled the deck. So if you save hybrid seed, you can do that and you can grow it out. And that's what breeders do all the time. What you'll see in that next generation is a really cool genetic experiment. You'll see, different colors, different shapes, different sizes, different growth habitats. And so, yeah.
Every time I do that, I get a little tiny cherry yellow pear tomato. I don't know why they seem to all of them cross, but every time I've tried to save my hybrid seeds, I wind up with these little tiny yellow pear tomatoes.
Oh, interesting. I wonder, yeah.
I've done it like different years, and it just always is weird.
Oh, that's cool. So what? And they're uniform. That's interesting.
Yeah, but they always start out like I started out with a nice paste tomato. I'm like, oh, I'm going to save these paste tomato, red paste tomato, and the next year I planted them because they were a hybrid, and they're yellow pear. So you're right. It's a roulette game.
It's a roulette game, and by the way, that's the whole plant breeding process. That's the essence of it, right? So you'd cross two parents, you'd grow them out, save the seed, grow them out again, and you have all this different things, and you would pick the plants that you like, you do it again, and you do that like 8 different generations. And if you do that 8 generations, then you get back to something that is like an heirloom. We call it fixed. So, it's like you shuffle up the deck, and if you only take, a few cards out, you take a 2, 3, and a 4, and then you shuffle those again, and then you only take the 2, you only have 2 in your deck. So you'd have a deck of cards with all 2s, if that makes sense. And that's the whole breeding process. That's how new varieties are created. And I think it's really, we see ourselves in sort of the group of people who are developing new varieties. And there's heirloom varieties that have been around for hundreds of years that are fantastic. And there's new varieties like, Berkeley tie-dye springs to mind as something that's a relatively new variety that people really love. That's the product of a breeder who's been, doing this traditional process that we've done for thousands of years and still coming up with cool new varieties that people like.
How long did it take to come up with the purple tomato? How many years did it take to develop it?
A long time. So the tomato was made by a professor, Kathy Martin. She's in England, and she is a extremely inspiring person. She's a childhood diabetic, and that's one of the reasons that her science went in this direction, because her health and well-being has been so tied to the food that she eats for her entire life. And so this led her to study, how is it that plants make certain nutrients? How do they make more? How do they make less of it? She was working mostly on Snapdragon to understand, because it was a really good model system. So people know, like, there's lab mice and there's fruit flies and things that people use to study genetics. Snapdragon was a really good tool for flower color. And she found from that in about 2005, 2006, there's these 2 genes that seem really important for flower color. So if they're present in a Snapdragon, you get this sort of dark red color flower. If they get mutated in the Snapdragon, then you lose the color and you have white flowers. So the way genetics works is you have, okay, what happens if we lose this gene? Okay, we lose the color. Now, if you want to prove that this gene really leads to the color, you need to put it back in, right? And say, well, if we put the gene back in, then will we get this color back? So Kathy did that in Snapdragon. Then she said, well, if this really works, what if I put it in a tomato? Or what if I put it in another plant? And it happened through serendipity. There was a lab next door to her that worked on tomatoes that knew how to do this transformation where you add a gene in. So they put it into the tomato, and this was about 2007. Lo and behold, oh my gosh, the tomatoes, they formed green, and then instead of turning red, they turned purple. So 2008 was the first scientific publication, 17 years ago. And it's taken up until last year for us to, for the very first time, allow these seeds to be grown by people out into the world. So it's been a labor of love, of persistence. The amount of energy and work that Kathy and her team have put into it is just, it's staggering. And that's sort of the legacy that I'm trying to honor as we get this out.
Wow.
So we got some questions. This is awesome. We really could go a lot longer. So we got some questions. Go ahead, Tammy. Go ahead.
I just want to make a statement. In my mind, I'm going, okay, so this genetic modification is a shortcut because it takes 8 years to fix it, as you just said, to fix a tomato that you're developing yourself in your own garden. I need 8 growing seasons. And here, she's been doing this since 2007. So it's not a shortcut by any means.
100% right. It's not a shortcut. And I often hear people talk about that, and scientists will say, hey, this is a shortcut. There are certain things that you can do faster. If we wanted to get a purple tomato without this, I have no idea if it would ever work. Well, and we know that, it has been done in the case of the indigo rose and the Cherokee purple, but those only have a little bit on the skin in response to light. And so it's a shortcut in making a fully purple tomato, but it's not like it's a
Yes.
very long shortcut.
Yes.
So LP asks, do you believe that GMO labels should always be used everywhere?
So I am completely in favor of GMO labels. And I think it's really good now in the US. We do have a labeling rule. So if something is made through genetic modification, it needs to it needs to carry the label bioengineering. And so we have, and you'll see on our seed packets, we state it's bioengineered for health and nutrition. And if you go to your grocery store and you go to the prepared foods aisle, cereals or crackers, you'll see on most labels contain bioengineered ingredients. And there's a few other produce items on the shelf, like the pink pineapple, for instance, that's bioengineered. And I think it's really important that people know where their food comes from and they can make an informed decision. So there's some people who say, I really want to look for bioengineered products and I'm going to look for that label and I'm going to buy them. Most people, about 80% of people say, honestly, I don't care one way or the other. If it's bioengineered, fine. If it's not bioengineered, fine. I buy products that have the non-GMO verified label on it because I like the product. There's cereal that my kids love that's non-GMO verified, and I buy that. I don't care that it's, plus or minus GMOs. And I think it's really important also to note for those who want to not eat GMOs, and there's a lot of people like that. It's about 10%, 5 to 10% of people who say, I never want to put that in my body. I'm not there. I haven't seen enough of the science. I'm very sympathetic. I have a cousin who's like that. He said, I'm not ready to do that experiment with my body, and that's the way I view it. You can always buy organic, and organic certified in the US means no GMO, among many other things. And so for those of you who want to find, what are the labels, you can always go to organic, and that's for sure non-GMO. And I think it's good that these choices are out there. By the way, a lot of the controversy around GMOs came because there was not an organic option. And a lot of people only learned about GMOs after they found out they've been eating it for a few years. And they said, hey, nobody asked me if I wanted to eat GMOs. I just woke up one day and found out that I've been eating it for a few years. And it kind of feels like someone was doing an experiment on me. Right. And I think that's not okay. I'm very sympathetic to that. So I'm pro labeling.
So can you explain the difference between plants from breeding versus GMO?
Yeah. So let me think how to explain this. And this is where I'm a nerdy scientist and I want to make sure I'm not like only speaking to the nerds here. So GMO, as we understand it, is when you make what scientists would call a transgenic, which means you take a gene from one species and you put it into another, like from a snapdragon into a tomato. When we're breeding plants, you're actually modifying the genes. And so a lot of people say GMO is actually a really bad term because every time you do plant breeding, so we talked about the example where you have hybrids that you cross and you select ones that you like, and you every season select in a different path, and eventually you get like a Berkeley tie-dye, right? That's plant breeding. And the way it works is you're changing the genes that are there in that tomato year over year. And so plant breeding, let me sort of give a definition. Plant breeding is the process of selecting season over season, generation over generation, for a type of plant that you want, and doing so really by selection. So, hey, I want a yellow tomato that's resistant to this disease. So every season I'm going to select the ones that are resistant, that have yellow tomatoes. That's traditional plant breeding. Pretty much all of the food that we eat today has been bred by people in one way or another, sometimes with a lot of care and effort, sometimes almost by accident. The things that we eat is what falls on the ground and grows back, and we've had a hand in that selection. GMO, the definition is you're adding DNA from one species into another, and you're doing that in a lab setting in some way. But the thing that I always try to emphasize is you can't do anything worthwhile with a GMO without doing breeding. And people like me who have studied biotechnology and use that, I will stand up and say 20 years ago, there was a lot of hubris. There was a lot of, hey, we're these really smart scientists and we can make GMOs, and this is such a great thing, and we don't need plant breeding. And I think the people who have studied science like I have, we've been eating a lot of crow. we've had a lot of humbling lessons of, you can do some things with GMOs. You still need to do the breeding, and actually the breeding is the heavy lift, and the breeding is the thing that really makes magic. And so it's getting down in the soil, it's having the time year over year to grow the plants, it's growing big populations and doing selections on those big populations. So Joe, you mentioned you have 300 tomato plants. If you had 300 different tomato plants and you selected the best 30 every year, they would get better and better every year. If you only had 3 tomato plants and you picked the best 2, you're not going to get much better year over year. And so it's all about these incremental gains. And I think, when we think about health and nutrition, when we think about our habits, it's also like, get 1% better every day or every year. And that adds up to a heck of a lot if you're disciplined to build those habits.
And only if we took the 1% of what we do in our everyday life, if everybody got that 1% in whatever they're doing, you guys would progress in whatever you do in life. That's for sure. I used to coach high school athletes. Do your best 1%. So when you said that, I'm like, whoa.
It's
memories.
It's like that with everything, right? I mean, we're not so different from plants in that respect, right? I'll try to get a little better.
So I love the questions. Thank you guys. Because you know what? By you asking all these questions, we can have Nathan for another interview some other time. I never actually asked any of mine yet.
Well, yeah, let me take a moment and say thank you. Thank you all so much for tuning in and being interested and asking the questions. I love this. I love having this discussion.
So LP asked a question. Are there any bad aspects or types of GMO in your opinion?
So let me start by saying bad is really a value call, right? And so are there bad types of GMOs from a scientific standpoint that have passed regulatory and are out in the world? No, I don't think there's anything bad. I think there's been business practices around GMOs that I would not want to practice, I would not want to be a part of. And that's really where a lot of the controversy comes from. So I think suing farmers, not a good direction to go down, right? And we're doing everything we can to develop our product, get it out, build a business around it so we can make more products and better products without going down that path of over control and overreach. So I think that's really the question, is how are GMOs being used by the companies that are making them? Is it a generous act? Is it something that's really benefiting all the stakeholders? And it is something that people are getting input from all the stakeholders on. So Tammy, I see your hand.
On that, I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole for a second. There's another GMO that I heard of happening when they first started with them that I thought was, for lack of a better term, a really bad idea. And it was the tomato that they put the pork gene in or the pig gene in, and to keep it fresh longer. Well, the concept is great. Half of the world, and I'm generalizing here, half of the world will not eat your tomato because you have now made it not acceptable for their culture. And I just want to know how did they not, like, somebody somewhere had to have said, dudes, this is a bad idea. And they just kept going with it. Like, how does that pass through those, like the levels of checks that you have? I don't.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with a tomato with a pork gene. I know there's a fish gene that was discussed putting into a tomato, and there's been a pork gene put into soy. And so, your question is right on. I have kind of two answers. One is, should this be stopped either by the developers saying we shouldn't make this, or by the regulators who say this should not go out into the world? And let me give an extreme example. Say you were to put a poison, you could use GMOs to have a plant make some kind of toxin. Like ricin is a thing that's made by castor beans. Or you could in theory make a GMO that makes aflatoxin or something, right? This obviously would be a terrible idea. No one should do it.
Yeah.
And, if someone were to do it and it would go to the regulatory, that's exactly what they're looking for. They say, no, absolutely not. You need to destroy this, and that's done. I think there's a middle area where maybe someone wants a pork gene in their tomato. And I think as long as they knew what it was and where it was from, where is that point of people have the right to choose? And, if a million people came to me and said, hey, we're starting a GoFundMe and we want you to make a pig tomato, would you do it? I don't know what I would answer. That's very theoretical. I don't think I would do it because it's not a product I would want. But those are really interesting questions. Yeah.
And I think that's why it was like, I never heard of it again after a while.
Yeah. And those are, the products that are out there. There aren't any products like that. And so I think one of the things that's really interesting when we start talking about this is you can almost go in the way of science fiction. Hey, what if we were to make a tomato that could walk and talk? It's enabled with AI, and you could still eat it, but you can have a conversation with it. And because I've done the science for so long, I know how hard those things would be. So like a pork gene and a tomato, it would be hard to do. I don't know why anyone would do it. And so it's almost like, let's cross that bridge if if someone talks about doing it. And otherwise, there's a lot of problems right in front of us that we should be solving and working on. And let's spend our time and energy there.
Yeah.
So we're about an hour already. This is crazy. Is there a chance you could come on in the near future so we can continue
sure.
this topic?
Yeah.
Awesome. Another question we have, purple, grown with Hudson. Is the purple tomato a cousin of the Baker Creek's purple tomato? When they came out the magazine, and it looked exactly the same.
Yeah, so those are quite closely related, the Baker Creek tomato and our tomato. And it's a really interesting example of seeds are, and the world around us, this is a public good. We're all living in the same world together. We're at some level sharing everything together, right? And so, Baker Creek, for those of you who know, they had a version of the purple tomato on the cover of their catalog, and they were planning to market it. And they were under the belief that this was a non-GMO tomato that was fully purple. And that was really interesting because we've never seen any fully purple tomatoes except the ones that are made with bioengineering through this technology that we developed. And so we had a conversation with Baker Creek, have a ton of respect for the people over there. And they had a look and said, you know what, we're now not confident enough that this is a product that we want to sell. And so they ended up not selling it, the one that's on their catalog. They have a lot of other phenomenal purple fruits and vegetables that are in the catalog. And again, I want to come back to one of my main messages, which is when it comes to the garden, when it comes to the food that we eat, diversity is really good. And we should be eating different types of fruits and vegetables, and there's all sorts of purple ones, so some people want purple tomatoes, other people say, no, I just want to eat eggplants or blackberries or blueberries. And that's one of the beautiful things about the world that we're in, is there is so much choice and option out there.
That was a great question because I almost totally forgot about that. Yeah. I remember that purple tomato came in that magazine. I'm like, where's my Baker? I mean, this is awesome. Look at that. That's amazing,
Yeah.
And it's heirloom. That's my first thought. Yeah. And all of a sudden I felt bad for Jared because it was his business took a huge hit, I believe.
Yeah. And, I don't think they got hit too bad from what I've heard. And again, they have a phenomenal business, and it's really funny, the number of people who get their catalog and came to me and said, wow, this is so cool. So what's the deal? And, their catalog this year is strong and beautiful. And I think they're really the go-to place for a really broad diversity of different fruits and vegetables.
they are saving vegetables and fruits from extinction that I would never have access, even in this global market, I would never have access if they hadn't went, collected it, grown it out, and then made it available. They're really doing a huge service for humanity. I just want to put that out there. I really have great respect.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, I want to add sort of a plant breeding perspective to this. So, we've talked a few times about plant breeding. The way this works is you do diversity and then selection, diversity and selection, right? And this happens in a lot of things where, okay, there's a lot of companies and some of them go out of business and there's a few that survive, and in plants and the diversity of what we grow, a lot of people grow sun gold tomatoes, right? So if you only grow one variety or three varieties, most people have that. And one of the dangers is, if a lot of people grow the same varieties and there's only a few seed companies, and those seed companies say, hey, look, we're only going to sell the 5 varieties that do really well, then there's a danger of losing a lot of the diversity of, these ancestral varieties, these heirloom varieties. And so there's a lot of forces in our world today that are sort of selecting for efficiency, reducing the diversity that's out there. And I think Baker Creek and a lot of folks that are out there that are increasing the diversity, this is a really important force. And I think individual home gardeners are a really important force for this as well. 1, to buy the seed and support the diversity, and 2, to grow it out and to keep these lineages alive. And so I think that's, this kind of accordion of diversity and selection, it's important that we're mindful of how our actions impact that.
And one thing on Baker's Creek, the donations they have made to the world.
Oh yeah.
You couldn't be, there's so much generosity with every single person that works for that business.
Yeah, agreed.
Make that comment. And a lot of seed companies that are the same way. Mary's Heirloom Seeds, always out there helping people, donating things. Luke and my gardener, always, doing whatever it could do for the public, keeping prices where people could afford it.
Here in Michigan, we have several seed libraries, and all of the companies you mentioned donate the seed that at a certain age point they can no longer sell it, and so they donate that seed to these seed libraries to get them into the hands of gardeners that otherwise wouldn't try them. Yeah. And then it's a wonderful thing, because I know a lot of people around here that can't afford to buy, even seeds, and they can get them through the seed library, check them out, and then return seed, and it keeps it going. And that's Baker Creek is huge for doing that, and so is Mary's, and so is MI.
I love that.
So this is going to be the last question for today, and you're going to have some good, bad, and ugly questions next time we interview you, just to let you know.
I'm ready.
And it's important, because it's important that we all come to understanding what's going on. There's too many misconceptions of everything. And we'll talk a little bit about RFK, what he's planning too, and how it affects everything what's going on with yourself. So LPS question, how much environmental impacts of GMO crops been studied, like cross-pollination?
Yeah, so a fair amount, and it depends so much on the crop, and it depends so much on where you're growing it. So a lot of you probably know some plants cross a lot and other plants don't cross very much at all. Tomatoes are generally what's called self-compatible. And so if you picture a tomato flower, it almost never opens, and really it's pollinating itself. So when you make a tomato fruit, the pollen is coming from that same flower. Corn, on the other hand, does a lot of cross-pollination just because of how it grows and how the flowers develop. And so, different crops have different risks of cross-pollinating. And one of the ways that I often ground this is, a lot of you would probably grow like a Cherokee purple in your garden and a sun gold, and you would save the seeds of the Cherokee purple and grow them again the next year. And you wouldn't worry too much about cross-pollination from your sun gold onto the Cherokee purple, because with tomatoes, there's so much selfing. And so, our purple tomatoes have the same likelihood of cross-pollination as any other kind of tomato. And again, this this is how nature creates diversity, and then there's selection on that diversity, right? So I think what I often say is, let's take a step back and say, whether GMO or not GMO, the huge impact that we have right now in the world is with agriculture and with farming, right? So cross-pollination of the plants that we grow, even if they're not GMOs, we don't see a big effect in the world right now, but it's something to be mindful of. And, I want to sort of summarize. Often the cross-pollination question is about, what are the impacts on the natural environment around us? And I think what's really important is all the things we do as people, the impact that we have on the environment. And obviously farming uses a lot of resources. It's absolutely essential. Farmers are generally the best stewards of land, just to be clear. And there's different practices that have different types of impacts. And so I'm really a big believer in producing food and doing so efficiently and being mindful of what are the impacts that different types of methods have in the environment around us. And let's use our knowledge and our observations of the world, the scientific method, to try to figure out, okay, what are some practices we should do more of? What are some practices we should do less of? And recognize that, each location is different, each crop is different. And, it takes a lot of curiosity, a lot of listening, a lot of asking, to start to come up with some of these recommendations.
So LP just said, so can a purple tomato cross-pollinate with the snapdragon, vice versa?
So excellent question. No, it can't. So the purple tomato is really a tomato. So it can cross-pollinate with a tomato. It can't cross-pollinate with a snapdragon. And that's all about what are species boundaries? How can one go to another? And the only way that we could get the snapdragon DNA into a tomato, as far as we know, with the latest science, is with this biotechnology approach. That's a great question. I love that question.
Now, when you say biotechnology, is that just another word for saying GMO?
It's another word for GMO. And this is where, I forget sometimes that I'm a scientist. It's kind of a word salad, and definitions are really important. So I see biotechnology as this kind of blanket word that means using our knowledge of biology in different ways. So making a GMO is a type of biotechnology. Another use of biotechnology may be in diagnosing cancer, right? So if you have a tumor, doctors want to understand how to treat it, and they might extract DNA from the tumor and sequence it, which is, determine what are the mutations that are there, and that can help guide treatments that would work and not work. And so it's some of biotechnology is more about understanding what's there rather than manipulating what's there. It's a big umbrella.
All right. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on today. Looking forward to having you in the near future. Tam, you have any other questions right now?
No, I have 100 other questions, but I don't think we have time. I really want to talk to you some more.
I know, like I said, we can go on for a long time.
Maybe not appropriate for this. Like, you're making my mind spin. I have.
Well, Tammy, you have my contact. Please reach out, and I am so grateful. Excuse me, I'm literally choking up here. I'm so grateful that you're interested in this discussion, and and your listeners and viewers are as well. Coming as a scientist and someone who's done research at universities, one of the things that I know is it's so hard to sort of communicate science to the outside world. And typically scientists are the most to blame, because we use all these words and we've studied it for so long, it's hard to communicate. And that's one of the things that I'm most passionate about, is having the opportunity to have these discussions, and hopefully I make a little bit of sense. I'm sometimes a bit self-conscious that I'm too much of a scientist, so I hope this makes sense. And it's one of my dreams in the world that we can sort of find these common grounds and these common touch points and have a big conversation. I mean, oh my gosh, what a beautiful world we could live in if we do more of this. So I'm eternally touched by you and this whole experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We'll be back next Saturday at noon, our new time. I know a lot of people have no idea what time we go live right now, but we had to make a new time to fit our daily life. Get changes in life. We got to change things. So check out Grow Big TV next Saturday at noon with Mary's Heirloom Seeds, and there's some seed giveaways with that. And thank you, everyone, for liking, sharing us out. And thank you so much, Nathan, for coming today. And we are so looking forward to having you on soon. So thank you, everyone. Everyone, take care and have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.